It started with a scream, loud, sharp, and desperate, ripping through the silence of the cold night like a blade. Slippers slapped against the tiled hallway as a girl from Hostel C sprinted barefoot, hair flying, her voice cracking with panic. She was under my bed again, whispering my name. The words spilled from her mouth in gasps as she collapsed near the hostel's waiting room, shaking uncontrollably. Her eyes darted around like she wasn't sure if she'd actually escaped something or if it was still following her. Lights flicked on. Doors creaked open. Senior girls stepped out, robes tight around their shoulders, forming a sleepy semicircle. One of them rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Another one? That's the third this time." Someone shivered, not from the cold, but from memory. The hostel mistress appeared, lips tight. She crouched beside the girl, trying to calm her, trying not to let the others see the fear flicker in her own eyes. "We'll get you water. Just breathe. You're safe now." But the girl didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on something down the corridor, invisible to everyone else. Her lips moved slowly. She laughed this time. I heard her laugh. The night swallowed the silence again as the other girls slowly retreated into their rooms, whispering under their breaths. None of them would sleep well. Not tonight, not after this. But by morning, the halls were swept, the whispering died down, and the sun shone like it always did, casting a golden glow over the polished gates of Oxford High. Before we dive into the story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Your support helps us keep these stories alive and growing. Now, sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy this thrilling high school tale. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the school entrance. Janet adjusted the strap of her backpack and glanced through the tinted window of the SUV as it pulled into Oxford High's front lot. Her heart fluttered with nervous excitement. The campus was even more beautiful than the glossy photos in the brochure. Sleek glass buildings, trimmed lawns, and tall palm trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. It looked like a place where dreams were made. But as the car rolled to a stop, reality pinched her again. She wasn't going back home today. Her father, Mr. James, stepped out first, straightening his blazer like he was the one enrolling. Her mother opened the door beside her, forcing a smile. Janet hesitated before stepping down, her eyes scanning the massive compound. Everything looked perfect, but something inside her felt unsettled. "I still don't understand. Why can't I just come from home like other girls? The school allows these students too." Her father didn't even look at her as he replied, "You're 16, Janet. It's time you learn independence. You've been pampered enough." "But the house is 20 minutes away," I pressed, her voice cracking. Mrs. James placed a hand on her shoulder and gave it a soft squeeze. "It's for your good, sweetheart. You'll adjust. You always do." But her voice betrayed her, warm and worried. Her mother's eyes had glossed with emotion even before they walked into the registration block. After final documentation and a brief orientation, a staff member led them towards the girls' hostel. The polished tiles, white painted walls, and floral scents did little to soothe her Janet's rising tension. "Hostel C," the staff said brightly. "Your room is the third on the left, second floor. 8 girls in total, 4 bunk beds, top and bottom. You'll love it, very sociable." Janet barely nodded. Her mother whispered a prayer under her breath as they entered the room. It was spacious, clean, and brightly lit. A fluffy red rug sat between the bunks. Stickers, throw pillows, and lotion bottles revealed that some girls had already made themselves very comfortable. All 7 heads turned as Janet stepped in with her suitcase. "Meet your roommate, girls," the staff chopped brightly. "Janet James, our newest addition." A few girls offered polite smiles, some waved. One girl on the top bunk didn't move. She just stared. She was stunning, light-skinned, full lips, shaped brows, and a glossy high ponytail that shimmered with every tilt of her head. She sat with a magazine in her lap, eyes unblinking as they scanned Janet from top to bottom. Janet smiled nervously. "Hi, I heard," she said flatly, not smiling back. The atmosphere dipped. The staff quickly added, "Becky is your bunkmate. You're down, she's top. I'm sure you two will get along great." Becky finally looked away, flipping a page in her magazine. Janet looked down at her bunk, immaculate and untouched. She placed her bag on the mattress slowly, feeling that invisible wall already forming between them. Mrs. James walked over and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You'll be fine, darling. Just give it time." But when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "Mom, please, let me come home with you tonight, just tonight." "No, Janet," Mr. James said, firm and final. "Be strong." And that was it. They left. Janet stood there, her smile fading as the door closed behind them. The other girls resumed their chatter. Only Becky kept quiet, legs crossed neatly on the top bunk, eyes occasionally darting down at Janet. Janet busied herself unpacking, but she could feel it, the quiet measuring glances, the tension in the room. She had been there less than 30 minutes, and already it felt like she had stepped into a world with rules no one would explain. As she neatly folded her clothes into the locker, she looked up to find Becky watching her again. "Do you stare at everyone like that?" Janet tried to joke. Becky gave a slow smirk. "Only the ones who think they're prettier than me." Janet blinked, unsure if it was meant to be funny. Becky turned away. "Don't worry, you'll find out how things work here." That was her welcome. The classroom buzzed softly as students trickled in, exchanging sleepy greetings and rearranging chairs. Janet stood at the entrance, clutching her books, her eyes scanning the sea of unfamiliar faces. Then the whispers began, first in twos, then in hushed clusters. "Is that the new girl from Hostel C? She's fine, Sha. She looks like one of those magazine models." Even the chalk in the math teacher's hand paused mid-equation. He adjusted his glasses and blinked as if momentarily forgetting what he was writing. The murmurs made Janet's cheeks flush, but she kept her composure. She was used to stares, but this felt heavier, like her presence had tilted the classroom on its axis. "Janet James," the teacher said finally, clearing his throat. "You're welcome. Take the empty seat by Jake." She turned to the direction he gestured. Jake. He was already seated, leaning back slightly, flipping through his textbook. Dark-skinned, with a low-cut fade and eyes that held an intensity even from across the room. Her heart did a small jump. As she walked towards the seat, she felt several pairs of eyes trailing her. She sat quietly, trying not to draw more attention. Jake looked at her briefly, then gave a polite smile. "I'm Jake," he said, voice low, but warm. "Janet. You missed the first half of the class. Here, slide his notebook towards her. Copy this. The teacher moves fast." She blinked, surprised at the gesture. "Thank you." "No problem." Across the room, Becky watched them with narrowed eyes. She hadn't even noticed Janet enter until Jake tilted his body slightly towards her. That slight lean he never gave anyone, not even her. Becky had a thing for Jake since the first week of resumption. It wasn't just his looks, it was his mystery. He didn't chase girls like the others, and that silence, it gave her something to fantasize about. She liked a challenge, and Jake had been a beautifully frustrating one. Until now. Now he was talking, smiling, offering his notes. Becky's jaw clenched. Her pen snapped in half. "I'm still the queen here," she muttered under her breath. At break time, Janet and Jake sat in the school cafe, sipping coffee and laughing softly at a joke only they could hear. Janet felt herself easing into the rhythm of school life faster than expected. Jake was kind, funny in a quiet way, and never once made her feel like a novelty. She appreciated that.
Back in class, girls exchanged looks. Some whispered, others stared openly. Becky didn't speak, she just watched. Her hand rested under her chin, and a smile danced on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. When the final bell rang, Janet gathered her things and waved goodbye to Jake, who nodded and said, "See you tomorrow." As she walked back to the hostel, she caught herself smiling. Maybe this wasn't going to be so bad after all. That optimism vanished the moment she pushed open the door to her room in Hostel C and looked up. There, perched casually on the top bunk, was Becky. Becky swung her legs slightly over the edge of the bed. Funny. Janet paused and smiled. Maybe this is good. At least I'll get to know someone from class. Makes the hostel feel less strange. Becky leaned forward slightly. Don't get comfortable. Janet's smile faded. Sorry? There are rules here, Becky said, her voice low and deliberate. Keep them. Janet blinked. Rules? Becky lay back against her pillow, staring at the ceiling. You'll learn soon enough. The room felt colder somehow. Janet sat on her lower bunk slowly, unsure of what just happened. She glanced around at the other girls, but no one seemed to notice or care. What had felt like a friendly coincidence now called into something else entirely. Something sharp and dangerous. As Janet pulled her blanket over her lap, she caught Becky watching her again from above. No smile, no welcome, just that same quiet stare. Every morning, like clockwork, Janet's phone buzzed at 6:15 a.m. Jake. Wake up, Mommy's Bureau. He teased gently over the line, his voice low and amused. It became their little routine, him waking her up, her groaning and promising to get out of bed, and both laughing by the end of the call. Janet never thought she'd need someone like that so soon. She had imagined herself growing into the independence thing gradually, not struggling to get through nights without crying into her pillow or checking her phone for messages from her mom that never came. Jake became her anchor. He brought her lunch to the hostel every now and then, simple things like meat pies and more drinks, and would leave them with the hostel matron before heading back to class. Sometimes he'd walk her to the cafe during break, holding the door open like it was second nature. They'd sit at the far table near the window, laughing over teacher impressions and sharing stories about childhood disasters. To everyone else, it looked like they were dating. But to Janet, it was just comfort, and it felt good, familiar, safe. But not everyone saw it that way. From the top bunk, Becky watched it all unfold with venom quietly boiling in her veins. Jake wasn't like the others. He was supposed to be hers, the one she couldn't quite get, the one who never folded over her beauty, and that made him a prize she had yet to claim. But now he was smiling with the new girl, laughing, calling. It was enough to make her want to scream. Becky didn't act out in the open. No, she was smarter than that. She started with whispers. At night, while the lights were off and the hostel hummed with gossip, she'd lean into the nearest ear. She stood desperate, don't you think? Did you hear she lied to get close to Jake? New girls always act sweet until they steal everything.
The words slithered through the room like smoke. Subtle, but toxic. Soon, Janet noticed the shift. Girls she'd smelled that suddenly turned away. Conversations paused when she entered. Even her locker had a new scratch across the handle, deep and deliberate. One afternoon, after another tense, silent walk into the room, Janet had had enough. Becky was sitting on the edge of her bunk, painting her nails a deep red. Janet closed the door behind her and took a slow breath. "Can we talk?" she asked. Becky didn't look up. "I'm busy." Janet walked over anyway. Just for a second. Becky capped her polish and stared. "Well?" "I don't know what I did to offend you," Janet said, keeping her tone calm, "but I'd appreciate it if you stopped spreading lies about me." Becky arched a brow, as if amused. "Lies? Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not fighting you, Becky. I just want peace." Becky stood up slowly, now eye to eye with her. The air between them tightened. "Stay away from my man," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Your what?" "Jake." I let out a short, nervous laugh. "I didn't know he was yours. You two don't even talk." "That doesn't matter. He's not supposed to talk to anyone else, especially not you." Janet held her ground. "We're just friends." Becky's eyes glinted.
There are no just friends in this school. Then she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Janet stood frozen for a moment, then sank onto her bed, stunned. The lines were drawn now, and no amount of friendship bracelets or bunkmate bonding would undo it. Becky had declared war, and worse, she wasn't playing fair. It started with the feeling of not being able to breathe. One minute, Janet would be asleep, tucked under her blanket, her body finally giving in after a long day at school. The next, she'd feel something pressing down on her chest, heavy, suffocating, like invisible hands pinning her in place. Her eyes would shoot open, but her body wouldn't move. No matter how hard she tried to scream, her throat stayed closed. Then just before she could panic enough to pass out, it would stop, vanish, like it had never been there. The first time it happened, she wrote it off as a bad dream. But this second time, she saw something. A dark figure crouched beneath her bunk, right below Becky's mattress. At first, she thought it was a trick of the eyes, a shadow cast by the wardrobe maybe. But then it moved, shifted, crawled backward into the darkness, with its fingers dragging across the tiled floor with an eerie softness. Janet sat upright, her skin clammy, heart racing. She stared at the space under her bed for a full hour before sleep returned. The third time, she felt the presence long before she opened her eyes. There were eyes watching her, cold, silent eyes peering out from the wardrobe, like something or someone had been standing there for hours waiting for her to wake up. Each night it got worse. Each time, she woke drenched in sweat, her heartbeat thudding wildly, and a fever that would last until the afternoon. Her energy started to drain during the day. She couldn't focus in class. Her eyes grew dull. Even Jake noticed. "You look tired," he said one morning, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I haven't been sleeping well," Janet confessed, too exhausted to pretend. He tilted his head, concerned. "Is it the hostel? The girls?" She hesitated, not wanting to sound crazy. "It's more like my dreams, or something in the room. It feels wrong, Jake. I don't know how else to explain it." Jake didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He simply nodded. "It could be stress. Maybe your body's adjusting. But I'll help you. I'll get you some groceries, fruits, drinks, anything with energy. You'll feel better." Janice smiled weakly. "Thank you. You're always looking out for me." Of course. What she didn't tell him was that she had already gone to the hostel manager. The woman nodded politely as Janet spoke, her face unreadable. "It's probably just stress. You are new. A lot of girls feel overwhelmed in the first few weeks." Janet insisted. "But it's not just stress. I've seen things. Shadows. Someone was under my bed." The woman's eyes flickered. "We take hostel safety very seriously, Janet, but nothing can hurt you here. Try to stay calm. It will pass." Except it didn't pass. Every night brought a new terror. Whispers near her ear, her blanket being pulled, her mattress vibrating softly as if something moved beneath her. Once she even heard her name spoken in a voice that sounded half human, half wind. Desperate, Janet decided to record everything. She placed her phone near her pillow and left the recorder on before going to sleep. But in the morning, when she checked, every file was gone, erased, no trace of sound, no trace of activity, just a blank empty app, as though she had never hit record. She tried again the next night, setting a password and hiding the phone in a sock. Still, by morning, the audio was missing. Her battery would be full at night and nearly drained by dawn. It made no sense. What Janet didn't know, what no student knew, was that after a disturbing incident 3 years prior, the school's management had secretly installed hidden CCTV cameras in key hostel hallways and corners. It was for safety, to monitor serious threats without invading private dorms. But what it captured sometimes wasn't always easy to explain. And no one, not even the matron, had been granted full access to review it without higher approval. In her room, Becky continued to play the part of the indifferent roommate, never too friendly, never openly cruel, but always watching. She never offered help when Janet was sick. She never asked why she was shaking at night, but her eyes followed every move Janet made, from the way she clutched her phone under her pillow to the way she stared at the wardrobe each night before turning off the lights. Sometimes, When Janet would wake up gasping, Becky would be awake, smiling faintly in the dark.
Janet's body had begun to betray her. It wasn't just the nightmares anymore. Her days were now filled with headaches, a queasy stomach, and waves of exhaustion that made her legs tremble. She could barely get through her notes without her vision blurring. Her appetite had vanished, and when she did force food down, it came right back up, burning and bitter. She stopped eating entirely at the school canteen. Everything smelled too strong, too artificial. Even water left a metallic aftertaste on her tongue. Her skin was pale, her lips chapped, and every time someone looked at her too long, she could tell they were wondering the same thing. What's wrong with her? Jake was the only one who asked out loud. "You look worse than yesterday," he said gently, pulling a chair beside her near the science lab. "I feel worse than yesterday," Janet admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing stays down. I haven't slept properly in weeks. You need to eat something, Janet, real food, something fresh." "I've tried. The cafe stuff makes me gag." Jake frowned, clearly thinking, "All right, from now on, I'll get food for you myself. Homemade snacks from the staff-approved store. I'll leave them with the hostel matron, so it's officially checked in." Janet didn't argue. She was too tired to protest. True to his word, Jake began dropping off carefully packaged meals every 2 days. He'd label them clearly for Janet James, Hostel C, and hand them over to the hostel manager, who would inspect the bags for prohibited items before calling Janet to pick them up. Everything was documented and routine. It didn't go unnoticed. Becky watched the entire process from the hostel corridor. She stood with her arms crossed, leaning casually against the railing each time Jake arrived. She never waved, never greeted him, just watched, observed, studied. She had figured out the pattern. Jake came at 4 p.m. sharp. The hostel manager would examine the food bag for a minute or two. If all was well, she'd place it in the small holding cupboard for students to retrieve. All Becky needed was one moment, one small opening. The opportunity came on a Thursday. Becky waited by the stairwell until Jake handed over the labeled food sack to the manager like always. The woman opened it, checked the contents: white rice with stew, 2 grilled pieces of chicken, and a canned malt drink. She was mid-inspection when a loud crashing sound echoed from the archive room down the hallway. "Ah, what's that now?" the matron muttered, leaving the sack on the counter as she went to investigate. Exactly what Becky wanted. She moved fast. In less than 5 seconds, she was at the counter. From her bra, she pulled out a tiny paper packet of pale blue powder, rat poison, stolen weeks earlier from a forgotten corner in the school's old kitchen stores. She sprinkled it quickly over the stew, sealed the container again, wiped the lid, and backed away just as the matron returned. "False alarm," the matron sighed, adjusting her scarf. "Just a tray fell from the shelf. Nothing serious." Becky smiled sweetly. "Hope you're okay, ma." The woman nodded. "Thanks, dear." Minutes later, Janet was called down to collect her food. She smiled weakly when she saw Jake's handwriting on the label. She carried the bag back to her room and sat quietly on her bed. Becky was on her top bunk, scrolling through her phone, earbuds in, or so it appeared. Janet ate slowly. The first bite was a relief. For once, her body didn't reject the food. The rice was warm, the chicken soft and perfectly spiced. She even took a few sips of the malt. 15 minutes later, she called Jake. "Thank you," she said, trying to smile through the phone. "This is the first time I've actually enjoyed a meal in days. You're a lifesaver." Jake chuckled. "You're welcome. I'll bring more tomorrow. Get some rest, alright?" They hung up. Janet leaned back against her pillow. Then it hit. A sharp twist in her stomach, like someone had stabbed her from the inside. She crawled forward, clutching her belly, a loud gasp escaping her throat. Sweat poured from her face. Her breathing quickened, her fingers trembled. Then came the vomiting. First just bile, then red, then chunks of rice stained with something darker. She screamed, raw, primal, before collapsing onto the tiled floor. Her legs kicked, arms flailed as she gasped for breath between vomit and sobs.
The other girls in the room jumped to their feet. Screams erupted. One girl ran to the door, yelling for help. Becky was the first at Janet's side, crouching low, pretending to help hold her shoulders steady. "She's burning up!" she shouted, playing her part. But her eyes were calm, watching, satisfied. 2 staff members burst in. "We need to take her to the clinic now!" Janet's body twitched violently. Blood dribbled from the corner of her lips. Her eyes rolled backward. They carried her halfway down the corridor, her body limp, mouth foaming, fingernails scratching at invisible air. She didn't make it to the clinic. Just 5 steps from the entrance, Janet James gave one last shudder and completely collapsed. The hallway went silent, and Oxford High lost its brightest new star on the cold, hard tiles of the hostel floor. The ambulance hadn't even left the school compound when 2 plainclothes officers showed up at the administrative block. Word spread fast. The girl from Hostel C is dead, and her boyfriend brought her food just before she died. Jake was in the middle of a chemistry class when 2 security guards entered the lab and quietly gestured for him to come with them. The silence in the classroom was heavy, thick with suspicion. Jake followed them, confused but compliant. But when he got to the staff office and saw the police, their questions landed like stones. "Did you bring food to Janet James today?" "Yes, I do that often. She hadn't been eating well." "Was it prepared by you?" "No, it was from a trusted store inside the school premises. I handed it over at the checkpoint. Ask the matron." "She died minutes after eating it." The words hit like a brick to the chest. Jake's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then slowly he whispered, "That's not possible. She called me. She said thank you. She said it was the first time she felt okay in days." He sat down. His fingers trembled as they gripped the armrest. "Please," he said quietly, "I would never hurt her." Meanwhile, the school management was already in panic mode. The headmistress called Janet's parents before the news could leak outside the school walls. Mr. and Mrs. James arrived less than an hour later, faces pale, their clothes disheveled. Mrs. James broke down the moment she stepped into the medical office and saw her daughter's lifeless body wrapped in white. Mr. James did not cry. He stared, unmoving, eyes glassy. When the principal started to speak, he raised a hand to silence her. "I want an autopsy, immediately. And if the school tries to bury this, I promise you I will burn it to the ground." The autopsy report came back the next morning. Poison. A common rat poison, powdered, ingested through food, concentrated enough to kill within 30 minutes. The authorities turned back to Jake. They had already seized his phone, reviewed his recent calls and texts. The last one was from Janet at 5:17 p.m. "Thank you for the food. I feel better." Jake kept repeating those words like a prayer, like a lifeline. She was happy. She was fine. I would. But the school had to act. He was suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of the investigation.
Later that evening, the school allowed Mr. James to collect Janet's belongings from Hostel C. A staff member accompanied him to the room. The air inside felt untouched, still carrying the scent of her lotion and hair cream. Her bed remained half-made, the blanket crumpled from the chaos of that final afternoon. As they packed her things into a box, the staff member pulled back her mattress, and something slid out. A notebook. The cover was bent, some pages dog-eared, the edges stained slightly from thumbprints and pen smudges. Mr. James opened it and read the first few entries in silence. "I miss Mom. I miss how she made me feel safe. Something's wrong with Becky. She watches me too closely. It's like my nightmares return when she stares at me before sleep. If anything happens to me, talk to Jake. He's the only one I trust." Mr. James froze. He turned to the staff member. "I want this documented, and I want every camera in this building reviewed." The woman hesitated. "Sir, the dorms don't have cameras. It would be against privacy." "I'm not talking about dorm rooms. I know you have hallway surveillance, maybe even admin hallways. I want everything reviewed, or I'll call my own team."
Under pressure, the school's management called in IT security. 3 years ago, a now silent scandal had led to the discreet installation of CCTV cameras, mostly in corridors, food checkpoints, and side entrances. They were meant for staff monitoring, and no student knew they existed. The footage from the checkpoint corridor, dated the day of Janet's death, was loaded up and played in silence. There was Jake entering at 4 p.m., handing the food sack to the hostel manager. There was the matron, opening the container, inspecting it. And then she stepped away. 2 minutes later, Becky entered the frame, glancing both ways. She moved directly to the counter, opened the sack, pulled something from her pocket, and sprinkled it into the stew. She wiped her hand on her skirt, zipped the bag again, and walked away. The room fell silent. The headmistress leaned back slowly in her chair. Get the police, now. Jake's name was cleared that same day. Becky's dorm was sealed for investigation. She didn't protest. She didn't speak. She just stared as they took her away. The handcuffs clicked softly as Becky was led out of the school compound, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She didn't struggle. She didn't cry. Her face was an unreadable mask, blank, detached, almost bored. As the crowd of students and staff watched in stone silence, not a single expression of remorse flickered across her features. Only her eyes. Those cold, sharp eyes held something. Not guilt, not fear. Rage. Her arrest sent tremors through Oxford High. Parents flooded the administration with calls. Some pulled their daughters out of the hostel immediately. Teachers whispered in the corridors, unable to comprehend how a 15-year-old could plan something so cold, so fatal. The law, however, had its limitations. Because Becky was only 15, she couldn't be tried as an adult, not yet. The court ordered her to be held in juvenile custody until she turned 18, when formal trial proceedings would begin. For now, she would remain at a juvenile facility under psychiatric evaluation and surveillance. 3 years. 3 long years. In those years, Janet's absence hollowed out everyone who had ever loved her. Her mother stopped wearing makeup. Her father stopped attending business conferences. They barely left the house. The only outings they made were court dates where they sat quietly behind the prosecutor, staring at the girl who had stolen their only child and shredded their lives. Becky never looked at them. She sat still during the hearings, hands folded, hair always neatly tied, her gaze always fixed straight ahead. Even when the judge read her final sentence, life imprisonment with no possibility of parole, her expression didn't shift. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she cry. She simply stood when ordered, turned, and walked out as though being sentenced to die behind bars was no more consequential than being sent to detention. Her silence was the cruelest thing of all. Weeks after the trial ended, on a humid Saturday morning, Mr. and Mrs. James visited Janet's grave. It was a simple headstone, white marble with gold engraving, Janet James, beloved daughter, 2006 to 2023, a light the world couldn't dim. Mrs. James knelt before it, placing a small teddy bear beside the bouquet she brought. Her hands trembled as she brushed the edge of the grave with her fingers. "I should have listened to you. You didn't want to stay. You begged us." Mr. James, usually composed, stood a few feet behind her, shoulders stiff. But now even he couldn't hold it in. His eyes were wet. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded note, Janet's final diary entry, and stared at it as if it was the only part of her left. "We should have let her stay home," Mrs. James sobbed, collapsing fully onto her knees. "She'd still be alive if we hadn't forced her to go." He crouched beside her, pulled her into his arms, and they wept together, 2 parents drowning in the weight of a decision they could never undo. Far away, in another country, Jake tried to live again. His parents had wasted no time after his release. Though his name had been cleared, the trauma, media coverage, rumors, the whispers of guilt had taken its toll. For them, leaving Nigeria was the only way forward. "We need a fresh start, somewhere people don't know your face." He didn't argue. What was there to fight for anymore? but he couldn't leave without seeing her one last time. And so, on the morning of his flight, just as the sun began to rise, Jake took a quiet drive back to where she rested. No driver, no cameras, just him and a bouquet of white roses. He knelt in front of her grave, alone, no one else around. The morning dew clung to his jeans. His hands trembled as he placed the flowers down, gently, reverently. "I brought your favorite, white, just like that scarf you wore on your first day in class." His throat tightened. "I'm sorry, Janet." The words barely left his lips. "I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." His chest heaved as tears poured down his face. Silent and raw, he lowered his head until it touched the top of the grave. Both hands gripping the stone legs was the only thing anchoring him to earth. "You are the only one who ever saw me, Janet. Not just my face or my silence. Me, and I failed you." The wind moved softly through the cemetery, rustling the grass and trees. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the roses towards him. He stayed like that for a long time, tears soaking into the soil, heart cracked open. Then, slowly, he stood, wiped his eyes, one last glance, and he turned to go. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Soma Folktales and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive.